You know that feeling when you grab a cheap external drive because it looks good on paper, only to discover a week later that it stalls during a big backup and you're left scrambling for a replacement? I've been there, and that kind of buyer's remorse is why I'm extra picky about any budget network storage I bring into a home office or media room. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In today's video, I'm digging into the QNAP Turbo NAS TVS 673e, a machine that promises ultra-fast storage with a built-in AMD GPU. But the real question is whether it actually saves you from the cheap alternative headache. First off, let's talk about the problem this box is trying to solve. A lot of creators, small business owners, and serious home theater enthusiasts need a central place for massive video libraries, 4K editing workflows, and continuous backups. The typical solution ends up being a mix of a consumer-grade NAS and a separate external SSD for speed, which means juggling multiple cables, power adapters, and a patchwork of software. The TVS 673e is marketed as an all-in-one answer, a 6-bay chassis, an AMD RX 421BD graphics chip, 8GB of DDR4 RAM, and a 512GB SSD cache that's already sitting inside the unit. On paper, that sounds like it could replace two pieces of hardware with one. What really matters is how it behaves once you actually plug it in. The first thing I noticed during setup is the sheer number of ports. 4 USB 3.0 slots give you room for a couple of external card readers, a webcam, or a USB-C dock without having to fight for a spot. 2 HDMI outputs let you hook the NAS directly to a TV or a monitor, which is a nice surprise for a device you normally think of as headless. The 4 1 gigabit Ethernet ports can be aggregated for up to 4 gigabits per second of throughput if your router supports link aggregation, something that makes the advertised ultrafast claim feel less like marketing fluff and more like a practical advantage when moving terabytes of footage across the network. I tested the TVS 673e in 2 real-world scenarios. In the first, I used it as a central media server for a 4K home theater setup. I loaded a 6 terabytes mix of movies and series onto 3 2 terabytes drives, left the SSD cache untouched, and let QTS 4.3 handle the streaming. The result? Smooth 4K playback on both HDMI outputs, no buffering even when I switched from a high bitrate Blu-ray rip to a 60 frames per second gaming stream. The built-in Radeon R7 graphics handled the transcoding on the fly, which saved me from having to buy a separate Plex server or a dedicated GPU for the media box. The second test was a small business backup workflow. I set up scheduled snapshots of a 200 GB work folder from my laptop, with the NAS handling versioning and remote replication. The SSD cache kicked in during the initial bulk copy, slashing the time from over an hour on a plain 1 GB NAS to roughly 20 minutes. After the first sync, incremental backups took just a few seconds, and the system never missed a scheduled run. For anyone who can't afford downtime because a missed backup means lost client data, that reliability is a big selling point. Now, let's be honest about the trade-offs. The TVS 673e is not a plug-and-play box. The chassis arrives sealed, and while the documentation walks you through installing drives and the optional memory modules, it assumes a bit of comfort with opening hardware. If you're used to snapping a pre-populated external drive into a USB port, you'll need to buy the HDDs and RAM separately, and you'll have to spend a half hour assembling the system. That upfront effort can feel like a hurdle for casual users who just want a story-and-play solution. Another practical weakness is power consumption. The AMD RX 421BD chip is great for on-the-fly transcoding, but it draws more juice than a typical low-power NAS. In idle mode, the unit still pulls around 30 W, which translates to a noticeable addition to your electric bill if you keep it running 24/7. For a home theater that's already on most evenings, the impact is minimal, but for a small office looking to keep operating costs low, it's something to factor in. The software side, QTS 4.3, is robust but a little overwhelming at first glance. There are dozens of apps ranging from surveillance camera management to Docker containers. I found the media server setup intuitive after a quick tutorial, but the deeper features like virtualization required a bit of learning curve. If you're the type who likes to tinker and get the most out of your hardware, that ecosystem is a gold mine. If you just want to drop a folder and stream it, you might spend more time navigating menus than actually watching content. So, who should consider buying this NAS? If you're a content creator who edits 4K video on a laptop and needs a fast, network-attached scratch disk, the TVS 673e's SSD cache plus GPU transcoding can shave hours off your workflow. If you run a small studio, a photography business, or a boutique design firm that requires reliable, versioned backups,